This is the 2022 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro, and it's ancient. This version of the 4Runner came out 13 years ago, and frankly, it feels even older than that. But despite its age, the 4Runner is tremendously popular. Last year was the 4Runner's best sales year ever in its entire history. So today I'm going to review this new 4Runner and find out why. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've had some great sales recently, including this beautiful B8 Audi S4 in Nagaro Blue, which sold for $38,500, this fantastic Tesla Roadster, which sold for more than $86,000, and this wonderful Lexus LS430 Ultra Luxury, which brought over $30,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. Check it out at carsandbids.com. So let's talk 4Runner. Toyota sells a family-oriented mid-size SUV here in North America. It's a crossover called the Highlander. But if you want more ruggedness and off-road capability with the same practicality, you get the 4Runner. The 4Runner starts around $38,000, but if you're looking for the ultimate off-road version, you get this one, the 4Runner TRD Pro, which starts around $53,000. Of course, that's if you can find one. I say that because 4Runners are in extremely short supply. Demand is huge, especially for this off-roader TRD Pro model. These are usually selling for huge markups over the sticker price. Despite the 4Runner's ancient age and driving experience, people just keep buying them. In fact, this TRD Pro is basically the same truck that I reviewed 4 years ago. It really hasn't changed, but the 4Runner has become so much more popular even since then. I wanted to review it again and find out what exactly is driving this massive success. And so today I'm gonna do just that. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the 4Runner TRD Pro and show you its quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the TRD Pro 4Runner with one of its very biggest quirks, and that would be current pricing for these. Now, all car pricing right now is insane because of the chip shortage and demand, and Toyota trucks and 4Runners are especially insane, but the TRD Pro is insane above them all. This truck has a sticker price of probably around $55,000, $56,000, somewhere in there, but you will not find one of these for that price. They are in incredibly high demand and short supply, and markups are common. Dealers are typically getting $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 over the sticker price for TRD Pro 4Runners right now. And that makes this a $65,000 to $75,000 SUV, which is huge money. Now, I mentioned the market pricing situation early on in this video because I want you to keep in mind that pricing as I show you around this truck and show you just how old it feels. Like I said, this body style 4Runner came out back in 2010. It's 13 years old and it feels like that inside. You're paying 65 to 75 grand. I'm going to show you some of its ancient touches in here. For one, there is no wireless cell phone charger in here. Basically, every other vehicle has one, especially at this price point. The 4Runner doesn't. You also don't get a heated steering wheel in here for 65 to 75 grand, and you don't get cooled seats, ventilated seats. The 4Runner doesn't offer it. Another feature you don't have. And next up, how about this one for old school? Up front, the 4Runner has only one USB port, and it's USB-A. I've been in cars that have have 4 USB ports in the front, USB-C. Not this thing. You do get a cigarette lighter style charger, as you can see, but no other USB ports than this one. And next up, speaking of technology, how about the backup camera resolution in this infotainment screen? Looks absolutely terrible. Gotta be among the very worst of any new cars. Looks like something from a flip phone screen from the mid-2000s. That's your backup camera in the 4Runner. Truly, truly awful. Again, for $70,000. And it gets worse. The backup camera's no good, so you're thinking, well, it's a big vehicle. At least you can use the parking sensors, right? Haha, wrong. No parking sensors, front or rear. You don't have them. You just get that poor quality backup camera. And another item that Toyota hasn't yet modernized is the gear selector. A lot of cars now have an electronic gear selector. You push buttons to enter the gears. This one is an old school lever. You got to pull it between all the gears, and that's how it works. And the lever part that you grab, it's not like that's even beautifully integrated. You can just twist it and unscrew it and pull it right off. That's the level of quality integration we have with this old school gear lever. Feels totally different from basically every other modern car, especially at this dollar value. And then there's the other stuff, like for example, the key fob, which you can see here. Very simple, cheap looking key fob, honestly just plastic. And you'll notice not many buttons on it because there's not that many features. No remote start button because this doesn't offer remote starting. No power tailgate button because this doesn't offer a power tailgate. At this price level, an SUV with no power tailgate basically unheard of, but that's what you get here. And since I'm on the outside of the TRD Pro, let's talk lighting. You know how every car on the market has LED running lights? Well, the TRD Pro doesn't, as you can see. They're just halogens. This thing came out back when not too many cars had LED running lights, and Toyota never bothered to upgrade them throughout the 4Runner's entire model run. So its running lights are just halogens, incredibly old school 90s, early 2000s feature. And in fact, LED lights are few and far between on this 4Runner. The front turn signals are old school halogens, even though almost everybody has gone to LEDs for turn signals. Same deal in the back, an old school halogen turn signal lamp like some economy car in this pricey Toyota SUV. Now, it's worth noting, to Toyota's credit, they did add adaptive cruise control at some point in this car's run, which is a nice feature to have, especially in the modern era of traffic, but they didn't bother to change the grille, and you can see the plate that hides the adaptive cruise control sensors is just a plastic rectangle on the front of the car, not well integrated at all because it was an afterthought that came later, and they didn't change around the grille to adapt for it. Crazy. And then there's the powertrain. This is Toyota's 1GR FE 4-liter V6, and it's been around for 20 years. I am not exaggerating. This engine first went into Toyota vehicles in the early 2000s, and it's still around in the latest 4Runner. Here it makes 270 horsepower, and it's mated to a 5-speed automatic transmission. That is true. Other automakers have 8, 9, 10 speeds, dual clutches. This is still soldiering on with a 5-speed automatic. The result is 17 miles per gallon in combined city and highway driving. 17, which is absolutely abysmal, largely thanks to this old school engine and transmission. Now, if all of this stuff sounds insane for around $70,000, if all this stuff sounds outdated and old-fashioned and ridiculous at this price point, well, it isn't. It actually isn't. This is a very crucial point for explaining the 4Runner's success, so listen closely. I get it. I am a Toyota truck enthusiast. I own a Land Cruiser. I previously owned a 90s Land Cruiser years ago. I love these Toyota trucks, and I understand one simple truth, which is some of the stuff that feels so old-fashioned is actually what draws a lot of customers to this vehicle. It might seem low-tech and old-school to to you, but to a lot of people it seems like less stuff that's gonna break, like things that are tried and tested and simple rather than new crap they have to learn and deal with. So all of these features that seem old school are actually a plus for the people who buy these 4Runners. In fact, this 4Runner is aging to the point where it's starting to become sort of a US market equivalent to the 70 series Toyota Land Cruiser. That is an old school SUV that Toyota has sold basically unchanged in a lot of markets for decades, but people still buy it because it's so simple, so few things that can break, so useful and basic, and that's sort of the situation here. People buy the 4Runner not in spite of its old-fashioned feel, but actually because of it. But it's not just the perceived durability and long-lastingness that makes these so desirable. It also has to do with the ruggedness and capability, particularly for the TRD Pro model, which is at the top of the 4Runner hierarchy. This has a lot of off-roading features, including Toyota's multi-terrain select system. You can see it here. It allows you to select which terrain you're on, and then the truck will adjust its suspension and driving characteristics to adapt to that particular terrain. You also have crawl control in the TRD Pro model, which is sort of like an off-road cruise control system that will kind of do it for you off-road and get through some crazy challenges if you're a little nervous that maybe you're not skilled enough to do that yourself. You also get four-wheel drive in the TRD Pro, of course, which comes with low range, which can be beneficial off-road. You also have a locking rear differential in the TRD Pro. You can see the button here. You press this to lock the rear diff, which is also beneficial off the pavement. Now, it's important to point out that all of these features are also included in the 4Runner TRD Off-Road, which is also tremendously capable. But the TRD Pro does take things a step further with a few extra benefits. The biggest is the suspension. This comes with Fox shocks that add additional capability, and that is combined with these chunky all-terrain tires, which look like they can take on the world. And those two items combine to give you maximum ground clearance. Almost 10 inches of ground clearance in the TRD Pro and an approach angle of around 33 degrees, which is pretty strong. TRD models also include this skid plate, which enhances your off-road capabilities. You can see TRD is actually printed on it, and this keeps rocks from puncturing anything under your vehicle when you're doing serious off-roading. And the thing about this truck is, as capable as it is off-road, it also just feels capable, which frankly is probably almost as important at explaining its success and market pricing. I'll give you an example. You see these dials in the interior, these silver dials look very purposeful, massive, look like the kind of thing you would twist to go into some aquatic mode to ford a river. Well, those dials adjust the climate control temperature. That's all they do. They have no like off-roady purpose, but they look so brawny and muscular, and they give you that feel just like so much stuff does in this truck. Another good example is just the design of this interior. This dashboard, very much upright, doesn't have any swoopy lines or modern design. It feels like a truck, because that's what this is. Then you have the floor mats, rubber floor mats, of course, because they're easier to hose off when you get them dirty out in the wilderness. But you can see there's like a mountain scene on the floor mats and a tire tread running through the center, again underscoring just how off-roady this vehicle is. And the cosmetic benefits appear on the outside too. The TRD Pro models come with their own wheels, these unique to the TRD Pro and very cool looking, very muscular compared to other 4Runner models. TRD Pro models also include this roof basket, which I don't know how useful this is actually going to be. I think the majority of people who buy these are actually going to be annoyed because now the truck is too tall to fit into their garage, but it certainly looks cool, and that enhances the image even further. And speaking of that image, let's talk overall styling for a minute. The 4Runner just looks cool. It is muscular and boxy and brawny in a way that so many other modern SUVs or crossovers just aren't. They're just not as expressive and off-road rugged looking. And the 4Runner really does a great job making people feel like they're off-road rugged. So you have this off-road capability in this vehicle, and you have the appearance of off-road capability, and that really helps. And I think the durability and reliability of some of these simplistic, old-fashioned touches, those two items are a huge factor in why this 4Runner is so popular. But anyway, more on the 4Runner's success later. Next, I want to move on to some of the interesting quirks and features in here, starting with one of my very favorite features, the roll-down back window. This window in the tailgate rolls down, as you can see. You do that with this button here in the center console. You press that and rolls down just like a window, and you can roll it back up automatically too, which is really cool. You get a dog back there, you can stick his head out, or you can roll down all the windows and get like a nice breeze going through. It's a cool feature, and you can even roll it down from the outside. You see these little arrows on the tailgate, you press, and then this window rolls down, and that allows you to stick smaller items inside without having to open the entire tailgate. And you can roll it right back up by pressing the other arrow, and then it goes back into place. That is a very cool feature that, frankly, I wish more cars had. But next, another interesting quirk is the cup holders in here. You can see sort of normal looking cup holders, but if you look closely, there's a rubber insert that says remove for larger cups. If you remove that, then you can use the cup holders for larger cups. Interesting. Also interesting in this vicinity, on the inside of the center console storage lid, there is a compartment here designed for tissues. It's even labeled tissue. And you take a tissue packet and stick it in here, and then you always have a place for your tissues built into your 4Runner. Next up, another interesting quirk in this interior, kind of a nice one, is the large buttons for basically everything. You can see these climate control buttons especially are absolutely massive. I kind of made fun of some of them earlier, but they really are huge, which makes it easy to use, like if you're wearing gloves, or just simple to press and see, which is kind of nice. Not as nice is the infotainment system, which is the exact opposite. Tremendously small screen and not especially intuitive or easy to use. It's relatively responsive, but it's just not all that good. Displays are busy, the screen is small, so controlling it is difficult, and it can't really show you all that much information. Because of that, it's really not Toyota's best effort. Now, the people who buy these, again, probably won't care too much about that. They like the old-fashioned stuff, but it's certainly old-fashioned. Now, one upgrade Toyota did give the 4Runner in the last few years, there is now a full color screen in the gauge cluster. You can see it's not a full screen gauge cluster. You still have old school analog gauges, but there is a screen in the center, and it's fine. It gives you your basics, vehicle information. It can show you what's playing on the radio or the media, whatever. And so that's kind of nice to have. Probably the most unusual thing about this screen is when you turn on the 4Runner, it gives this bizarre graphic showing like an off-roader going out into space. It doesn't really make any sense to me, but that's what they've done. So whatever. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the 4Runner, which is kind of unusual in the sense that there's good leg room, knee room, hip room, that sort of thing, but pretty bad headroom back here. I'm sitting up here, obviously taller, but my head is right up against the ceiling, which is disappointing in a fairly large vehicle. But anyway, on to the other quirks and features of the back seat. Now, for one thing, you don't have climate controls back here, but you do have climate vents, which I guess is reasonably acceptable. More amusing is the fact that you have two USB ports back here. Only one USB port in front, but two for the rear passengers, so they have more devices they can charge in back. Another interesting item is this center armrest folds down, of course, as you can see. It reveals cup holders, and even the back seat cup holders have these inserts that you can pull out for larger cups, which is nice. Now, next up on the subject of seats, one disappointment with this truck is it doesn't offer a third row. No third row seating in the TRD Pro. This is especially disappointing for me personally, because I would have bought one of these in 2 seconds over my Land Cruiser if I could have gotten a third row, but they don't offer it. Now, other 4Runner trims, the base model SR5 and the Limited, offer the third row, but the off-road oriented versions, they're 2 row only, unfortunately. With that said, you do have a large cargo area back here, quite large in fact, and it's very tall because of the 4Runner's boxy shape, which a lot of those sloping line crossovers miss out out on, well, you got it here. Another nice benefit of this cargo area, you have a power outlet back here, both cigarette lighter style and a household power supply, which is nice to have and kind of surprising for such an old school vehicle to have that amenity that some brand new cars don't. But forget about the third row. Unquestionably, the biggest disappointment back here in the 4Runner is the fact that you can't get a power tailgate, which is disappointing for several reasons. Obviously, the price point is one. Another is this tailgate is unusually heavy, and so closing it is actually kind of a chore, which is unfortunate. Now, you do have the roll down back window, which I showed you before, but one drawback here is the way that it works. For one thing, in order to put the window down from the outside, the 4Runner has to be off. So if you're waiting to pick somebody up and you're idling and they walk up and want to throw something in the back, you either have to turn it off for them to put the glass down, or they have to manually open up the heavy tailgate. And it's even worse when you want to put the glass up from the outside. Not only does it have to be off, but all the doors have to be closed, which is especially annoying, and it kind of limits the usefulness of this rear window, except for a breeze while you're driving along. And finally, I want to discuss the 4Runner's success. I've already discussed some of the reasons why it's successful, even though on paper it doesn't seem like it should be, but I want to talk actual numbers here. Last year, the 4Runner sold about 145,000 units, and like I said, that makes 2021 the most successful sales year in the 4Runner's history. It came out in the 80s, and last year was the best. Now, the second best sales year was 2018, and third best was 2019, even though this design came out in 2010. This is getting more popular as it's getting older, which is totally insane. By comparison, Jeep sold about 200,000 Wranglers last year, but the Wrangler is a lot cheaper, and Jeep sells some portion of those to fleets like rental car companies, doesn't really make any money off those sales. 4Runners, they make money on every single one, and they make a lot on these TRD Pros. And so those are the quirks and features of the Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new 4Runner TRD Pro, also known as the 8-year-old 4Runner TRD Pro or the 13-year-old 4Runner. It is kind of crazy. And when you get in this vehicle, I drive a lot of new cars, and so it hits me even harder. I could see someone who's coming out of like a 90s 4Runner, which some of the people who buy this are, and they get in, they say, oh, this is great, like a big improvement, it's great stuff. But you drive other modern vehicles, basically any other modern vehicles, and you can tell instantly that this is an ancient one. And especially at this price point, there's going to be a lot of comments down below saying, oh, no, I don't want any of that stuff, it just breaks. But usually the kind of people who say that are driving a $6,000 used car. It's a different story when you're paying the market price for this vehicle, which is in the $70,000 range, 65, 70 grand. Most people paying that money do want the technology, and they are disappointed by what I would consider to be this vehicle's relative lack of equipment. Now, it's worth noting though that this has the basics. This has what you need to like live in modern society. You got a touchscreen, you can pull up, Bluetooth audio, which everybody wants, zoom in and out on the map, that's good. You get blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise. It has like the normal stuff. If it didn't have that stuff, it would really seem stupid, but it's got like just enough to not be totally out of this realm ridiculous. But it doesn't have a lot of nice amenities, especially at this price point. Now, one interesting thing, the TRD models of the 4Runner have an exhaust. And the exhaust actually sounds pretty good. It's like the Raptor exhaust. It like makes a V6 sound good, but it's almost infuriating in the sense that it sounds more than the car provides performance. So you like accelerate and you hear it and you're like, great, this sounds like muscly and wonderful. And then you're like, where's the actual acceleration to match this performance? It doesn't make any sense. And it's a little bit of a disappointment. The problem isn't the engine. The engine's pretty good. It's reasonably responsive. The problem is clearly the transmission. A 5-speed automatic, that was a big deal. Cars started adding that in the late 90s. And by 2003 or 4, pretty much everything had a 5-speed auto. This is a 2022 with a 5-speed auto, and it's just not acceptable anymore. And truthfully, I think that is this 4Runner's biggest drawback. A lot of the other stuff in this interior, I think, is, and I could see it as being a benefit. People don't necessarily want an electronic gear lever or a heated steering wheel or even LED running lights. You hit a deer and then you're looking for $1,000 headlight replacement. Halogens, it's helpful, it's cheaper, it's easy to replace. But the issue is emissions and fuel economy. 17 miles per gallon is just kind of a disaster, and even when fuel prices are cheap and that's pretty affordable, it's just not what you want to be doing anymore, especially because you can get cars this size, this capability that do a lot better. Jeep has a plug-in hybrid Wrangler. I mean, that's the level we're on here. 4-cylinder Broncos and diesel Wrangler. I mean, there are all these improvements that the 4Runner is just missing out on. And I get that this powertrain is reliable, but Toyota makes a lot of reliable engines that don't get this kind of gas mileage, and it's a trade-off you no longer need to make to this extreme, sacrificing fuel economy for reliability. But other than the powertrain, you know, a lot of this stuff is forgivable because the old school is what is attractive to this vehicle, and that is clear also when you're driving it. You have this upright driving feel. Everything is square and blocky like you don't get in so many modern cars. You're sitting very high. This is still a body-on-frame vehicle, and you're high up. You feel trucky. You feel like kind of the king of the road. It has that truck mentality to it, and that also is very appealing to people. Steering and handling is not very good. It's quite vague. There's body roll. The car is not unsettled, but it doesn't feel car-like in any capacity. The 4Runner is trucky. It always has been, and it still is. Truthfully, I hate to say this, but I really like the 4Runner. It is ancient, and I read all these car reviews of the 4Runner, all these reviewers saying, I can't believe people buy this, it's so terrible, and modern standards, you can get something so much better, and they miss the point. Car reviewers, their whole world is based on new cars coming out, and they review them, and they think that's so cool, but not everyone does. Some people want a more basic experience. A lot of people, as it turns out, and this gives that, and I think it's cool as hell. But I do think a new powertrain would be nice, and for that reason, I suspect the 4Runner will probably be getting a redesign the next couple years, because I just don't think this old school V6 and 5-speed auto can soldier on forever. But for now, it's still a great vehicle. It still sells in huge numbers, and it's got a lot of loyal fans. And frankly, it's easy to see why, if you're into a car that is relatively low tech and is all about like brute force capability, like this one. And so that's the 2022 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. These aren't the most efficient, the most comfortable, the most high-tech, the most modern vehicles, but they are cool-looking, capable off-road, tremendously reliable, and they hold their value really well. And all of that stuff is a big deal for a lot of people. And now it's time to give the new 4Runner TRD Pro a Doug score. And the Doug score is here, 53 out of 100, which places it near the bottom against its competitors, though it gets the exact same score as the 2018 4Runner TRD Pro I reviewed a few years back, although slightly different individual scores. The 4Runner TRD Pro is an awesome truck, durable, capable, very cool, but it is expensive for what you get, so don't go in with high expectations. Still, this truck proves there is a big market for old school tough, and it also proves that not everyone wants the latest and greatest gadgets, and some people are willing to pay up specifically for a more traditional SUV experience.